Today, I will be discussing politics, the non-controversial subject of politics, and that'll include the subset of racism as well. Today, let me give you an update. My ankle's still healing, the broken ankle. I have about 2 to 3 more weeks in the cam boot, but I'm able to walk a little bit with crutches. So we went out today to a Mexican restaurant to celebrate our 18th anniversary and had some good food and margarita and Negro Modelo beer. So all is good. We came back, and at 6 o'clock there was a tornado warning and this terrible storm. Don't know how long I'll have battery, or rather electricity, lights, but we'll see. So I'm talking about politics, and I want to bring in stories and some history that I've learned through my life, because that's how we learn things. So my first memories of politics goes back to when I was 6 years old in Fernandina Beach, Florida. This was the Cuban Missile Crisis. I remember seeing military trucks that included tanks and other military equipment, quite a few convoys of military equipment going down the highway down to Key West or wherever. And there was discussion of, nuclear war and, what JFK was going to do to stop it, or whether Khrushchev would set off some nuclear bombs. And one night, I remember dreaming that I looked out the window and I saw a mushroom cloud. It was nighttime, and I saw this mushroom cloud through my window above my bed. And I remember I went right back to sleep. But when I woke up in the morning, I thought about it. Oh my God, what are we going to do now? So I made my way early into the kitchen, and saw my mom there, and she was tired and looked worried or upset, and so I thought, oh no, she knows. And so I said, what are we going to do now? She goes, what? I said, oh, never mind, nothing, because I realized it was obviously a dream. So I looked outside, and I saw the grass and the trees, and I was so thankful. And that's my first memory that has anything to do with politics. And of course, the next one would be when JFK was assassinated. I think I was in school at the time. I don't recall. I would have been 6 years old, so I think that might have been the first grade. Yeah. And so we were let out early, and everybody was crying, these adults, and I'm like, why are you so upset? What are you crying about? What's wrong? And so I went home, and I don't know if Dad was crying. Mom was crying. Everybody was so upset, but I couldn't relate at all. Not at all. I wasn't sad. I would have been sad if a pet had died, or someone close to me was hurt, but not JFK, certainly. So my parents, Fernandina Beach was a small southern town right on the border of Florida and Georgia, and a lot of its industry was fishing, shrimp boats, and so we always had a lot of good seafood. It was great. And my dad sold life insurance there to both blacks and whites, and we had, I mean, we had a, we lived in a white neighborhood. They were all segregated. Um, we had, I know when Mom had a baby, that Dad would hire a colored woman to help with the housework and cleaning and so forth. And so I do remember having we called them colored maids back then, colored help. And, they were fine. They did a good job. We were always appreciative. And, and there were never any problems in the community with no racial issues at all. Dad was never, ever, my family was never racist. In fact, he would talk about the black people he knew. I wish I could remember some of the names and he'd tell stories about some of these old black guys who they get oysters and were fishermen, and he'd tell stories about things they knew and things they did, and it was remarkable. I mean, they were talented, smart people, and Dad was always amazed at the things the practical things that they knew. So there was never any hatred. My dad never showed any hatred. He would lose his temper sometimes at us brats. He was an ex-Marine and drill instructor, and so, we weren't always proper soldiers. But he wasn't abusive like in the movie about that fighter pilot. I can't think of the name of it now. Written by Pat Conroy. But no, he was never abusive like that. So Fernandina was a fine place to grow up. I remember there was sometimes during elections there would be politicians that had a van with they would have a speaker. They'd be speaking on a flatbed and throwing out candy or serving hot dogs. And I remember saying, Mom, he's giving free hot dogs away. Let's go. He goes, don't you accept anything free. Just wait for me. So we'd have to wait for her to get our hot dogs. So that was politics. And I do remember one time that my younger brother Bill, now he's 4 years younger. He's passed away, but he was 4 years younger than me, and so he was probably 2. He could speak, but he was. So Mom answered the door. There's some man at the door, and she answered the door, and there was a black man at the door, and Bill. I don't think she was holding him, but she was either holding him or he was right there, and Bill was like, Mom, what's wrong with him? He's black, and she was completely mortified and embarrassed, and she goes, I'm sorry, my son's never seen a black man. And so it was never an issue. Mom used to read us Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and Treasure Island, and of course there was the runaway slave Jim in the story, and we always liked that story. We never thought anything about racism. The people that looked bad in that story were not Jim. Certainly not him. It was the con artists that they would run into on their journeys, that Huckleberry Finn ran into on their journey with Jim in his raft, running away from home. And running away from his dad because Huckleberry Finn had killed his dad, who was extremely abusive. So we didn't really have political discussions at home in Fernandina. So then we moved to Daytona Beach. Well, we moved to Jacksonville, Florida, in just a couple years, and then Fernandina Beach. Then to Daytona Beach. And when I was about 10. And there, more politics came into play. There was a lot of the peers that I had that I would play with. I mean, early on, I was cutting grass and delivering papers, and other paper boys would, like, one of them won a rodeo to somewhere, and so he invited me to go with him, and we talk and meet people. But the culture there, the people, my peers, they were racist. I mean, they hated blacks and Jews, or at least they said bad things about blacks and Jews and gays. And my parents had never said anything about blacks other than good things, and they never said anything about Jews or gays. So, I had no knowledge, and I don't even know why that these kids didn't like those people. I mean, I don't think we really discussed it, other than that they were, bad people for whatever reason. So I think my parents were Republicans. I know they liked Nixon, and and race really wasn't an issue back then. It was the Vietnam War. From when I was in high school, it was all the Vietnam War, and the country was really divided back then. And I the war ended in '75, and I graduated from high school in '74. So, I mean, we could have been drafted. No, I don't even think I could have been drafted at my age. So it just wasn't an issue. But I'd never thought of running away, or I would have fought if I'd been drafted. It was not an issue. So in college, at the University of Central Florida, I did take some classes on history and political science and math and science. And I read a lot of, or some, John Stewart Mill, and I was really impressed by him. He's a libertarian, and pretty much a libertarian, believes in individual freedom and the rights of the individual, and small government, and conservative government, conservative monetary policies, capitalism, obviously. And so also during that time in college, of course, I was on the rowing team, the crew team, and I met a guy who was who turned out he was gay. But he was very well read and very funny and well built, just a great guy. And I realized then that there's nothing wrong with gays. In fact, he was a hell of a lot more interesting than a lot of people that I've met. He could hold a conversation, man. He was well read and a great guy. And my first roommate, one of my roommates, was a black guy from the Bahamas, and again, just a great guy, just well read and good athlete and smart, great guy. And then I met some Jewish kids too, and I realized that this was all propaganda that I had been taught when I was younger, and I didn't know any better. It's the same thing with, I told you the story about the marketing in toothpaste. Now, I didn't believe my parents. I believed the TV. And the same thing about, fairy tales like the Tooth Fairy, or, Santa Claus, or the Easter Bunny. I mean, it's all fairy tales. It's all propaganda without any value. In fact, it had negative value. These are good people. So that was a real lesson for me. I just couldn't believe it. And so college, I was tended to be more liberal. Uh, I think my first vote was for Jimmy Carter and then Reagan, and then I probably voted for Clinton and maybe the Bushes. But then 9/11 happened, and something very significant happened, or that I discovered, that really changed my mind. And prior to 9/11, I had not been very political. I got my politics from my friends, from Saturday Night Live, from the Rolling Stone magazine. Oh, that's the place to go. um, but before that, I had really studied the greats, John Stewart Mill, and I mean, I read a lot of Dickens. He's not real libertarian, but I read Thomas Hardy and a couple other English authors. I really liked them. So 9/11 happens, and so I was talking to a lot of people about that, and I was surprised. A lot of people said, "Well, Bush planted bombs in the towers." I'm like, "Are you crazy? I mean, he's supposed to be the most incompetent guy, but yet he pulled off this tricky bomb planting on the right floor at the right time when these planes hit it." And so the top of it was a conversation I had with a person, a woman, about that, a very staunch Democrat. And she said, that it was an inside job. And I said, well, under the law, that you look at motive, means, and opportunity to see who is the guilty party. And these bombers had the motive. They wanted to keep the U.S. out of the Middle East. They thought the Western culture is decadent and it was ruining Islam. They wanted the military bases out of Saudi Arabia. And that was their declared goal by Osama bin Laden. They had the means. They trained to be pilots, and they trained to escape the FBI and the airplane security. And they escaped the FBI. If you read The Looming Tower, a really good book about this, and it's called The Looming Tower because in the Quran it says something about you shall kill your enemy where you find them, even in their looming tower. And so, they had a reason to do that. And they also, there's a belief in Islam called taqiyya, which means holy lying, that you're prompted that you should lie to further the cause of Allah. And they had early on been tracked by the FBI, and they knew it. And so they decided to start going to strip bars and drink and watch the women. And after a lot of that, the FBI quit following them, so they were not religious zealots, and so they quit following these folks. So they had the motive, means, and opportunity. They learned how to beat the security, and they pulled it off. And so this woman said, well, she said, you don't understand. It was still, Bush knew about it, and they were tricked by the Jews. Bush was tricked. He knew about it. And the bombers, they were tricked by the Jews. The Jews did it. I mean, this is 2001 in America. And people are talking about racism being the problem. Anti-Semitism is the problem. Or some other racism like obesity discrimination. Not that there is still racism. There's still some problems. But let's get real. So, and of course, Osama bin Laden said that he was the one that bombed the towers, and but anyway, when that woman told me this, I said, that's just insane. That's ridiculous. And I quit talking to her. That was canceled. I canceled that person out of my life. And anybody and still a lot of people believe, the 9/11 truthers believe this stuff, both on the left and the right. And at that point, what happened? I talked to a lot of Democrats and Republicans, and not a single Republican said that the Jews did it or that it was an inside job or there were bombs. But not one Democrat. The best they could do was say, well, it's just a theory. It's just a theory that they put bombs in it. They wouldn't say it was a bad theory. But a lot of other ones said, oh yeah, they knew about it beforehand, or they planted bombs, or it was set up to get oil, the Iraqi oil. That was the goal. And I just was flabbergasted how people could be so damn ignorant. And at that point, I started reading about politics, about Islam, and I became a conservative. I couldn't tolerate this kind of nonsense. And so the books that I really studied was that The Looming Tower. They made that into a movie, to a series on Hulu. That's pretty good. It's not as good as the book. But then there's also a documentary by Adam Curtis called The Power of Nightmares. And that's about both the FBI and CIA, what happened at 9/11 on the American side, how they missed it. And then also it goes into the history of Osama bin Laden. It's quite interesting because it goes back to the guy that came over, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood that came over in 1959 to get a PhD in education in Colorado. And I can't think of his name or the book he wrote, but he went back and wrote a book claiming that Americans are obsessed with cutting their grass and hedges and Hollywood stars, and they have no religion. They play these records and they dance close together and drink, and it's a culture that's death for Muslims. So, and that was the point of the Muslim Brotherhood, was to eliminate Western influence. And this started in 1959 after he wrote his book. Can't remember the name or his name. But if you want to know what's happening in politics, or read the right books, study. Don't just listen to what was said on Saturday Night Live or 5 minutes on the internet. I mean, it's nonsense. All right, so this discovery of mine, or this realization of mine, that this racism training that I got when I was young was such terrible propaganda, that I've thought about what does it take to prevent that, to stop that. And I mean, I've written a list of things that I'll talk about, but I want to talk about also, besides that book and the documentary by Adam Curtis, and his documentaries are on YouTube available, And it's Power Nightmares is, I think it's a 3-hour series, and he has other ones called the what's the name of it? I forget now. It's about narcissism. It's about Freudian philosophy and marketing. But it's on the internet. You can find it. But other people that I look to now for the truth, and it's not certain publications, or it's more individuals. It's not groups. I mean, I do read the Wall Street Journal. I do think that's the most accurate, and that's partially because of these journalists they have. So the people that I look to now, one is Bari Weiss, and she had been a journalist both for the New York Times and for the Wall Street Journal, and now she's on her own. She writes for Substack, and she's very good. Bill Mahr is good. Now he's a libertarian, and he's very anti-Republican, and he's very liberal, and he hates a lot of the right-wing politicians and beliefs, and he makes fun of them. But he usually has on both a liberal and a conservative to bring out both sides, and I appreciate him for that. David Mamet is good. He's an author, a playwright. Conrad Black is good. He was a publisher in Canada, good writer. Kimberly Strassel, or Stossel, I forget, Strassel, journalist for the Wall Street Journal, great. Daniel Henninger, also Wall Street Journal, super. Holman Jenkins Jr., Wall Street Journal, fantastic. Jordan Peterson, now he's more of a psychiatrist, a Canadian professor, and he doesn't really talk about politics as far as liberal or conservative, but his theories and ideas tend to be more conservative and anti. I mean, it's like libertarianism with a strong conservative caution based on historical teachings of the Bible, as well as other principles of life, human psychology. Victor David Hansen is good. He's a professor, a farmer, and a writer. He's very good. Thomas Sowell, he's a professor, a black guy. He's a writer. He's one of the greatest political writers in America today. He's getting up there. He must be like 85 years old, 88. But he's great. I'd say he's probably the greatest political observer in America, and has been for 50 years. Matt Taibbi actually is pretty good. He used to write for Rolling Stone, and he's a libertarian. He's a real liberal, but he's an insightful, gifted writer. And I don't always agree with him. He has a very liberal slant, but he sure is insightful, and he's usually on the right path, the right take. Dinesh D'Souza's good. He's a filmmaker, writer. I've seen a lot of his films and read one book. Dennis Prager's good. He has Prager University. He's a conservative thinker. So what else? As far as the racism issue, I mean, I don't think America's a racist country compared to all the other countries and compared to what it was in the 60s. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to get rid of hatred or crime or racism or criminal behavior, bad behavior, mental disorders. It doesn't mean they're good, but that's human nature. Just read the Bible, read any book, read any novel. It's not going to change. I mean, it's a lot better than it used to be, and there's the school system in America it hurts the underclass, be that minorities or non. I mean, if it's a class issue as much as a racial issue, if you have bad schools, you're not going to start out well in life. Not going to help you. Of course, the issue on, there's really no discrimination against gays anymore. That's pretty much gone. And then the Jewish issue is still a real issue. There's a lot of anti-Semitism in America, in the world, and it's called anti-Israeli. We're not anti-Jewish. We're anti-Israeli. But you start listening to them, and they're anti-Jewish, and so that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed one bit from when I was 10 years old, when I was told to hate Jews. So another observation that I made in the 2016 election was I talked to a lot of people because as I said in an earlier video about music, I would work out at lunchtime at the health club, and I was a member of other spas that I would go to after work or on the weekends, and I'd talk to a lot of people and see what people are thinking and saying, and there was a pattern. Most of the people that were pro-Trump were blue-collar workers, business owners, Christians, police officers, military, and so forth. Delivery truck men, truckers, and the ones that were pro-Clinton, pro-Hillary, were the teachers, the white-collar workers, the professors, the attorneys, the doctors, not all, most all Jews, but not all, most all blacks, but not all. And they didn't want to talk politics. They that was their position, and they weren't going to talk about it. And I think it's a pattern that is described in the book called black box thinking. And black box thinking is, of course, refers to the black box in an airplane. And the industry, airplane industry, they had to fix their problems, and they would do it with this black box, and the black box would tell them exactly what caused it, whether it was mechanical or pilot or both, and they would do the best they could to fix that problem. And so they had good, reliable, immediate, well, not real immediate feedback, but pretty immediate feedback. And so they would always go back and fix it. And that made the industry very, very safe. And this writer, the guy who wrote that book, talks about how that type of thinking has been used in some hospitals, and it's really improved the quality of the medical care. Because denying problems doesn't help anybody at all. And they also say in that book, and this again is my experience, that people such as business owners, firefighters, police, welders, these are the people that work with animals, these are the people that get immediate feedback. If they have a bad idea, a bad plan, or they make a bad statement, they get immediate feedback. Either it works or it doesn't. And so they know when they're stupid. But you take somebody like a high school guidance counselor. They tell an 18-year-old what to do, and they may not ever hear back, or they might hear back 40 years later, 20 years later. That's not sufficient feedback. And what kind of feedback, if they send out surveys, what are they going to get? 100% honest truth? Or, what? how could you get good feedback? So the question, I mean, the country's divided now more than I've ever seen it. During the Vietnam War, it was divided, but this is real hateful division. And so, what do you do? How do you ID political thought that's bad, or political ideas, or political statements that are bad, like I could have done at 10 when I was taught to be racist, or anti-Semitic, or anti-gay? How do you figure that out? Other than meeting the people 10 years later, but that's not immediate feedback. So here are my ideas that I think might be helpful. Does a statement contain anger, hatred? Is it motivated by anger or hatred? Now that can be justified. There's a validity to hating Putin or Hitler, but that's a rare situation. Trump is not Hitler. What else? Is the idea a bad idea or just against human nature? For example, defunding the police. If you have fewer police and you arrest fewer people and you send fewer people to jail, do you think that's going to reduce crime or increase crime? What do you think human nature would do in that situation? It's going to increase crime. You have to consider that. They're saying now that the way to stop inflation is spend more money. Do you really think that's, inflation's caused by too much money chasing too few goods? And it's not going to fix the problem. Okay, so I'm back. The camera shut off because it was too hot. My GoPro, I have to learn more about these things. Alright, so I was talking about, if it recorded previous to this, what political thoughts are perhaps bad ideas, or what do we need to do to identify political thoughts that are bad ideas? Well, one of them is the phrase you hear all the time, that walls don't work. Now, the Romans built Hadrian's Wall in 122 AD. The Chinese built their wall in the 7th century BC and from the 1300s to 1644. The Vatican's wall was completely walled up in the 9th century. Israel built a 700-kilometer wall in 2002. So if my neighbor or someone tells me walls don't work, who do I trust? History? The Romans? The Chinese? The Vatican? Israel? Or my neighbor? Now, I think what they're meaning to say is that, well, walls are not 100% effective. And so they say that walls don't work, and therefore they want you to believe that walls are zero effective. But the fact is, walls, I've asked, and they always say, well, you can climb over a wall or you can dig under it. Well, do you think everybody's going to do that? It's going to stop some people. And so how many would it stop? Maybe it's 80% effective. Maybe it's 70% effective. But it's going to be more than zero effective. And who lives their life wanting 100% guarantees? You're not guaranteed if you drive to 7-Eleven, you're not going to get hit and killed by a car. Nothing in life is 100%. Your medicines you take, are they 100% proven to help you? If they're not, then you shouldn't take them, because a wall that's not 100% is worthless. How many things in life are less than 100% effective? Is there a 100% guarantee you're going to be married for 50 years? I don't think so. So, it's just nonsense. It's just a bad idea. It goes against history, and it goes against human nature. People are lazy. They're not going to put effort into climbing over a wall or digging under it if they don't have the time, the tools, or the skills. It's going to be effective. West Germany had a wall. East Germany had a wall. There was only, I don't remember now. A lot of people escaped going through the sewer. We were actually there. We toured the sewers. We toured the wall. What's left of it. We toured the history of the wall and how people escaped, and I don't remember now the total. Maybe 2 to 4,000. But once they figured out the escape routes, it was closer to zero. Once they figured out to block the sewers and so forth. So it's just, don't give me this BS. So I've said I think the country is in trouble politically, and so is there hope? What do we do but other than identifying bad ideas, bad political thought, propaganda? All right, let me tell you a story. So I was a prosecutor down in Florida right after law school, and I started out in the juvenile division, and that was prosecuting juvenile crimes and prosecuting, well, not prosecuting, but being a kid that's becomes a ward of the state because their parents are gone or in jail, or the kids are delinquent. They're put in the custody of the state, either in a reformatory or with foster care. And so, I mean, I met a lot of these, we had hearings on each one of these. And so, I worked with a social worker who had a history and a background of the parents, and I met the parents and I met a lot of, I had a lot of hearings and I met a lot of people. And there was, first of all, it wasn't a racial issue. I mean, the population there was only maybe at most 20% black. Probably it was more like 15% black. And the crimes were mostly whites, not blacks. And the commonality was two things. There's a pattern. I mean, usually it's bad families. It has to do with bad families, bad parents, bad parenting. But these kids and even the parents, there were two common elements that I noticed. One was a lack of aspirations. They had no hope for the future. Maybe they looked around them and said, "Why bother? Who knows?" But they had no hope for the future, and they cared about only the present, and nothing else mattered. Lying, stealing, drugs. It's how I feel. I mean, and tons of bad choices. And the other thing, there was very little gratitude. People just didn't care. There was no gratitude. There was no happiness. There was no gratitude. There was no aspirations. There was no hope. It was pretty sad. And some of these kids were, young. Like I'd see them 4 or 5, 7, 8, really cute kids, and their parents were trash. And I knew that within 6 years, 8 years, they'd be out doing drugs and having sex with all the boys and getting venereal disease. I mean, that was just common. And it was predictable. So since that time, and this was like 84, 85, 86, I've thought about, aspirations and gratitude. How does that relate to life? Aspirations and gratitude. Is it religion? Is it psychology? Is it politics? I'll tell you what I think it is now. I've read a lot to try to figure this out. People became civilized. Well, we don't know. We know from the Bible because that was written down. And you're probably not going to guess the link here. I'd be interested how many people are thinking of what in our history has to do with aspirations and gratitude. And I don't mean just Christian history, I mean worldwide civilization history. And what it is civilization at some point in time started practicing animal sacrifice and human sacrifice in some situations, some societies. Now, why did they do that? According to the Bible and according to archaeologists, they did that to show thankfulness to the gods, for forgiveness of sins, things that have happened in the past, but also for future crops, for rain, for future good things. Now, when you have future good things, you can call that hope. But what is animal sacrifice in 2 words? It's aspirations and gratitude. Whether it's religious, that is biblical, or whether it's Mayan or whatever. It's replete in history. And here's another story that's not mine. It's the Epic of Gilgamesh that was written 4,000 years ago. It's in Sumerian on clay tablets. And Gilgamesh was the king of his city, and he was good at what he did. He was a great warrior. He was a great king. He had the right of first night. He had sex with all the women. He was a wrestler and he could beat anyone. And so he became bored. And he couldn't find a fair foe. So he looked around and he heard of this beast in the forest, this man who had been raised by wolves or whatever they have in Mesopotamia back then. So he devised a plan with his folks on how to bring this guy out of savagery. So here's what they did. They had, this guy would go to a river, a creek, and drink and bathe, and so they had been figuring out his lifestyle, and they said, why don't we put a prostitute, a naked prostitute out there, and let's see if she can start, civilizing this guy. So so he comes out there to drink water, and he had some aspirations. So he spent a week, 7 days with her, day and night, and he had gratitude, much gratitude. So this prostitute wanted him to stay and fed him good food, and he stayed, and he learned how to talk, and so she civilized him, and he then was trained by the sportsman to be a wrestler, and he was the best one around. So he then prepared, and they had a battle. Him and his name was Enkidu, Gilgamesh and Enkidu. So they had a huge fight, and I don't remember the results of the fight. It may have been a draw. But Gilgamesh was really impressed with Enkidu, and they became good buddies. And they decided to go on a quest to like slay the dragon or whatever the evil person entity was back then. So they went on this long quest and to slay this dragon. And Enkidu dies. He's injured in some battle, and Gilgamesh is depressed and tries to figure out what to do with his life. He can't get out of his depression, so he goes to try to find the holy men and goes to heaven or hell or what, underground, and he can't get any answers, and he finally stops at a wine bar run by this old woman, and he tells her his story, and so if you want to know the meaning of life, read the Epic of Gilgamesh. But I'll tell you what she said. She said, it's really not that complex. She said, you need to enjoy your life with singing and dancing and some good food and be clean and have clean clothes and good company, good companionship, good conversation. And he thought about it, and he realized that was the meaning of life. He didn't have to slay dragons. And it's interesting how 4,000 years ago, the heroes of this story are two women, a prostitute and a wine seller. Have we advanced in 4,000 years? I don't know. So, anyway, that's an aside. My point is that people have to advance in society with aspirations and gratitude. That's how you become civilized. That's how you get out of the doldrums. That's how you get out of the poverty. That's how you get out of whatever it is that you have is aspiration. There's a saying by Einstein that you can do what you want, but you can't want what you want. And I've thought about what the hell does he mean with that? And I think what he means is that you do what you want based on what you know and what you've done. And if you haven't done something or don't know something, you're not going to even want to do something that you don't know. How can you, unless you're insane, then you could want, I want to be Jesus, or I want to go to planet Xanatar and be a blue man. And, it's 2 light years away, but I can do it. Why do you want to go? I don't know, I just want to go. Well, you're insane. I mean, it's based on what you know. And so the more you do and the more you learn by doing, the more you know what you want and what you don't want. I had a job, I talked about it before, where I worked at Hawaiian Tropic. And I didn't want to I was making plastic bottles, labeling them, stamping them with the label, and filling them with suntan lotion or after sun conditioner cream. I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. And I also had a short job where I was unloading sandbags in the middle of a Daytona summer where sand was going down my back, and I had sand and sweat all over my body and in my shoes and socks and butt, and it was so much fun that I realized I didn't want to do this the rest of my life. That's how you learn what to want, is by doing, for good or bad. So what have I not covered? What do you think's going on in America that I have not covered that is a problem in America? What have I not covered? What are you thinking about? What have I not covered that was the cause of Nazi Germany success and failure? it's basically the demonization of people, the dehumanizing of others, scapegoating. That they said Jews had killed Christ and therefore they were evil. They were Jesus killers. They said they lost World War I. They stabbed them in the back. They blamed the Jews for starting Soviet communism, and they hated communism. So it's all the Jews, and they're not good like the Aryan race. Well, we have that now. Everybody loved Trump until he ran for president as a Republican, and then he was Hitler. Hitler, I say, Hitler. Elon Musk, everybody loves. He's going to save the planet because he's building electric cars. Uh-oh, he's buying Twitter? Oh, no. He's the stupidest man on earth. In fact, he's evil. He's stupid and evil. He maybe even is Hitler. I mean, that's where we are in this country. It's just nonsensical. How could deciding to run for office change completely one from an entrepreneur real estate person into Hitler? Nonsense. So, look at when, is it a bad idea? Does it involve hate? Are political thoughts and ideas hateful? Are they bad ideas? Are they not psychologically sound? Are they against human nature? To figure out what the hell's going on. Because this country is on the wrong track. It's just nuts. I mean, literally nuts. And I don't like this cancel culture, but if you tell me that you believe 9/11 was an inside job by Bush, you'll be the first one I cancel, because that's just insane. So, on that note, if you have any questions or want me to talk about a particular topic, you can email me at stephengmahoney@yahoo.com. So I hope you enjoyed this.